Hello and welcome to another introductory video for Golioth and getting started. Today we're going to be going over the nRF91, which is a platform that we've been targeting to use with Golioth early on. If you don't know, Golioth is an API service and a platform for you to basically get your IoT devices online much quicker. Today I'm here with Lachlan, and Lachlan, how you doing? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Chris. I'm an intern at Golioth. I'm doing kind of a mix of DevRel and embedded development, and I'm also working on our prototyping our Rust client for Golioth. So using Rust embedded, and that's something I'm working on among other things. And I'm really excited to help present using the nRF9160 with Golioth today.
Yeah, that's great. And so we are going to be using the nRF9160. This is live. You can see it. It's really here. This is a board from Jared Wolff's CircuitDojo. This is the beautiful clear solder mask version. So that orange you see is actually all copper. This is the module here, the nRF9160. Nordic Semiconductor makes it. It's got a M33, I believe, on board.
That's right.
Lachlan?
Yeah. Cortex M33.
Yep. And then also a cellular modem that also, the RF front end there is also using with GPS. And so basically it's a wonderful small low power mobile CAT-M1 solution for your cellular needs. We're targeting it because they also use Zephyr, which is a thing that we are big fans of here at Golioth. So we're going to go and install this whole thing. We're going to get started. We're going to show you how to pull in all the required things. There's also documentation. Lachlan, where can people find docs if they need that stuff?
You can check out the Golioth docs at docs.golioth.io. Mm-hmm. We have lots of documentation about how to use Golioth, all the different features, how to set up Zephyr and Golioth for your device, whether that's ESP32 or nRF9160 or many others that we support. Yeah.
Yep, great. So, yep, and we will have links to that down below, and that'll be ever-changing. So we should also say up front that some of this stuff might be a little different than you'll see in the docs, but we'll be revising this stuff all the time. And this is really meant as a getting started, showing how to dive in here. So why don't we do that? We're going to go over to Lachlan's screen. So where are we starting here, Lachlan?
I'm just starting here. We need to, because of the way because of the way Zephyr set up for the NRF, the Nordic folks have forked Zephyr to add support for some of their modem stuff, I believe. So, LTE and GPS and yeah, just those two. And I believe that's why they forked it. So what you have to do here, which is different than how you're setting up Golioth on, for example, the ESP32, is you first have to do West in it because you're using West, which is Zephyr's meta or build tool. And it initialize from Nordic's fork of Zephyr and then add Golioth on top of that. So we're going to go through that process right now. So first I'm going to make a new directory, Zephyr, and then I'm going to run this West init command, which pulls down, oops, that's the wrong one. Let me grab the right one.
These things happen. That's okay. Basically, West init is basically telling it, hey, here's where the file is going to be. That's going to tell you where to find everything else, right? That's what we're basically starting with here.
Yeah, actually, this is good because the first command, which was wrong in this case, is how you would normally do it for other boards. But in this case, we use the nrf connect fork. So I'm going to run that West init. This doesn't take too long to run. The next command you have to run does take a lot longer, where you have to run West.
Don't we want to go and update the file first? I guess we'll do it later. So we want to go and change West.yml first.
That's a great point. We should change that.
Either one's actually okay, right? So West update, what it's going to do as Lachlan's doing this, West update is basically saying it's looking at this manifest file. I think I had that term right, but west.yml, which is a YAML file, and it's basically saying here's all the things that are included inside of Zephyr. And what we wanted to do is we want to go and include the Golioth stuff in there, right? We want to say, in addition to all the things that are already listed in the NRF SDK that Lachlan already initialized there, we also want to include Golioth, and that's what he's going to be putting in here as well, right? Underneath that last thing, which is a memfault piece of software that it pulls in, we also want to include the Golioth Zephyr files.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I've just copied and pasted these from our from the README in our Golioth Zephyr repository, which is just a great resource for these things. But yeah, I'm just adding Golioth to to the west.yaml, so the West manifest. And this is in the project subsection.
Yeah, and so people that are beta members have access to the Golioth Zephyr repository, which has all this information. It has the README that Lachlan just mentioned there. And so what's next?
Next, we run West update.
Great.
This can take 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's going to go and pull basically everything that's in that west.yaml file. It's going to pull it all down, every repository that's individually controlled by either the chip vendor or the software maker, in our case, right, an API service as well, right? That's what Golioth is. We maintain our own. And West is going to pull all these things in. You said West has some other tool. What is it called? It's like a...
Yeah, they call it a meta tool, but it's also just a build tool.
Yeah, so basically it's a tool of tools, and
essentially.
So in this case, yeah, it's doing that. So let's switch over to my screen real quick as that's building, and we can just kind of take a look. I've already got this installed, so if we switch over here, so like Lachlan mentioned, or if I just list what's in here, you'll see that I actually maintain an NRF Zephyr directory separate from the normal one, and so if we switch into Zephyr Zephyr NRF, it looks like anything else. What the Golioth directory happened was we put that into modules. So if we switch into modules, lib, Golioth, now this is where all of our stuff lives, including all of the samples. Right now, if we do samples, you can see these are all the various samples that we have available here. One thing that's very interesting about Zephyr and really just kind of higher level operating systems like this in general is that you can use the same application level code to target different platforms, and that's something that Lachlan already kind of referred to here.
Yeah, and this works quite well in practice. For example, these samples all just use Zephyr's network stack, Wi-Fi support or just the network stack, which calls out to whatever networking the board supports.
Yeah.
So you can use these samples on whatever board supports Zephyr.
Yeah, it's I mean, really that level of abstraction, when it works, it's magic. I mean, it does work, which is crazy. Like you think about it, it's just saying like send a packet to whatever is taking care of my networking, Wi-Fi or cellular, Bluetooth, whatever it is. I mean, you need something on the other end for Bluetooth, but same kind of thing that we hope to switch into whatever mode you need. So hopefully satellite, LoRa, all these other platforms as they're pushed into the Zephyr repository and everything's pushed upstream to the official repository, then we could start to take advantage of them using the same basic plumbing that's available to every application here. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
What is the application we're going to actually start with here?
So we're going to use the hello sample, which all it does is sends logs to our logging backend.
Yep. Yeah, and so this is actually the same one that we used in the ESP32 getting started guide. So if you don't see that, we'll have that link down below. There's also a playlist with all of the tutorials that we have listed here. So that was this one. Still got it on the bench here. Actually, I've added sensors since we recorded that. But basically, we use that for it wakes up, it sends a packet to the network, and it says, "How you doing?" And then Golioth on the other end is basically receiving these packets, receiving these debug commands effectively, and then we're able to view them from the command line.
And yeah, and I can also show using our Golioth control command line tool. I can also show the logs showing up in our backend servers.
Great. Okay, so how's the install doing here?
It's all done.
All right, I'm chatty enough that I zoomed right past it.
It only took about 2 minutes, which is pretty fast.
Yeah, that's great.
Great. So next, what we have to do is we have to edit the prj.conf to basically add our credentials for the particular board.
That's right. Okay.
And the way this is set up right now is kind of temporary. Normally, in the future, when you, say, provision a new device or you're provisioning, say, 10,000 devices, you won't have to recompile your application each time for each credential because each device will have different credentials. So we're working on that, but right now, this is like kind of preliminary, and it works fine. It works fine for kind of testing it out. So I'm going to edit the prj.conf.
Okay.
Go to the bottom here. And what we have to do here is we have to add these config options. I don't remember them off the top of my head exactly what they're called, but I can add them here. So
right,
this one.
This might actually look a little bit different inside of, we're talking about maybe changing this so that they're default included. They'll just have like dummy variables in there. But basically what this is, PSK ID and PSK password, there's PSK rather, is pre-shared key, and basically
Mm-hmm.
it's the way to think about it is like an ID or a username and password. That's kind of the easy way to think about it. And we'll
that's
probably
exactly
be blanking
right.
these out so you don't have Lachlan's ID and password.
Yeah, for the one for these devices. There's one more thing we also need to add, which is config bootloader MCU boot equals Y equals yes. And that's because on the nRF9160, we can use MCU boot, so we can flash to it over USB instead of having to use a J-Link or similar.
That's right. Yeah. So the way to think about this is basically the modem firmware, the bootloader as well, which is on there, and we have some samples as well that show the bootloader. But on this device, there is a the modem firmware needs to kind of live there and stay. You want that to stay the same. If you imagine you wanted to push new firmware over the modem, you would do that. You want the modem firmware to still be there, and then you put the new code into the application space. So that kind of same thing there. And so that's why you need to have a separate.
MCU boot is also useful for a bunch of other things like DFU and stuff like that.
Yes, that's right.
So we're using it in this case. You can also use J-Link, and in that case, you don't need to add that option.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm just going to save this.
Okay.
And
actually, while we're here, since I've already got this here, so one thing that really tripped me up. It's in Jared's directions, but it for some reason did not register with me. Is to put this into bootloader mode, right? So DFU, like Lachlan's mentioning, you have to hold down boot, and then you hit reset, and then once you do that,
I'm doing that on my end as well.
Yeah, so this super blue light is on now, and that enables you to then pass that new firmware over what's called Newt Manager or MCU Manager. It's like a front end for the MCU Manager. So that's a key part there. So now we can just make sure you do that, or else you'll have a very frustrating time.
Yes. Perfect. And then I'm going to build this doing West. This is the CircuitDojo Feather and NS. And I don't need that -P. And so I'm just going to...
-P is pristine. That's another one where if you want it to wipe out, it's basically a clean build is a way to kind of think about that.
That's exactly right. And so now I'm going to press enter, and this will build. It might error out, and it doesn't. Sometimes you need to set the toolchain. In this case, I've done it beforehand. If you do need to set the toolchain, you'll need an ARM toolchain for this, a GNU ARM toolchain. And there are environment variables that you set, and those are in our documentation.
Right. We may have a separate video about that, but at the very least, it'll be in our documentation just to make sure. The toolchain basically is the GCC compiler that allows you to build specifically for ARM parts that are on your board. If you are building for an ESP32, that's going to be an Extensa, basically targeting Extensa, which is the type of microcontroller on there.
Exactly. And now, confusingly, there's an ESP32-C3, which is RISC-V. So
that's right.
All three of them. Great. So I've built this, and now I'm going to flash it to my board. I'm using Newt Manager, just to flash to MCU boot. And in this case, I have it in a kind of weird location. So that's what this long path is for. And it's just C serial. That's the communication we're using, image upload, and then the build Zephyr app update is just a path to the binary produced by Zephyr when you add the config MCU boot thing, which we talked about earlier. You're muted, Chris.
The modern conundrum. If you are using Jared's board as well, he also has docs on his site about programming. This is a good resource as well. We'll have that linked down below. So this explains some of getting set up with Newt Manager.
Those are totally worth looking at, yeah.
Yeah, yep.
And now I'm just going to make sure my board's in DFU mode, which it is, and I'm just going to press enter. And you can see it's flashing it. This takes a while because serial is a pretty slow protocol when the baud rate isn't super high. In this case, what is it? 16 kilobits per second. Kibibytes per second is the correct terminology. And then I'm going to show the serial output from my device. First, I have to check which speed it's on, and that's the correct one then. So I'm using Screen, which is essentially a tool that just can connect to kind of a serial endpoint, and with the baud rate and the path. And in this case, it's not showing anything. So because my device is in DFU mode, so I'm going to press the reset button. You can see it's booting Zephyr, and Golioth is initializing. Yeah.
That's great. So one thing we should mention here as it's initializing, so both Lachlan's board and my board, we already are set up with a carrier. In this case, we're both using hologram, but it works with, basically this board works with a lot of different MVNOs and SIM card providers. And so we will have separate videos about that. So if you haven't done that yet, that's something you should definitely do first. You need to make sure that your board can actually talk to the cell towers that are out there. Once it does, it can start to do what it's doing here.
The first one usually fails, and then the second one works. To continue the cellular conversation, I was just talking to someone in our private beta who's in Australia, and he was able to use a SIM card directly from his phone that he took out, and I don't remember the name of the carrier, but Australian carrier that I hadn't heard of before, and it worked perfectly.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
So you can see it's logging out that it's sending hello, and I will exit out of screen and run our command line tool called Golioth control and just get the logs. And I'm just going to set it to a 1 minute interval, so we just get the logs for the last minute. And as you can see, it's way zoomed in, but you can see Golioth hello, sending hello 8, 7. So these all the logs that it sent to the our backend.
That's right. Yeah, and so it's sending not only the stuff that we saw on the serial terminal, it also has all this metadata about, uptime and, what device it is and things like that. And
Timestamp,
really
all that stuff.
Yeah, it allows you to see other information about the device that it's sending back, because we're using one device right now, but like Lachlan referred to before, if you have 10,000 devices, you're really going to want to be able to filter on different capabilities or different devices that are out there or whatever. So yeah, this is great. Lachlan, do you want to show the console real quick as well?
The using the console.
That's right, the web
yeah,
console.
I
can show mine as well if that's
easier. You should probably show yours actually. I haven't logged in a while.
Okay.
The Golioth console is essentially.
Why don't you explain what it is?
Yeah, sure. The Golioth console, not to be confused with like a terminal, is a basically a web front end for doing the same thing as that Golioth control can do. So getting logs, kind of looking at projects and creating them, and all that kind of administrative stuff to do with our Golioth with the Golioth service.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so if we switch over to my screen, so what you'll see here, these are the various devices that I have going here. But what we're showing is what Lachlan was doing at the command line was basically looking at logs, and you're going to only see what I've sent recently. But I guess mine's been sending for a while. So yeah, this is today. This is 220, so mine's been sending for a while and I haven't even seen it. But basically, if I go and refresh this page, we should see 234, 233, 232. We should see that incrementing even higher. And so this is similar to what we saw with the ESP32. So I expect to see something higher than 234. My device might not be sending right now, actually.
Yeah, it looks like those logs are from about 15 minutes ago.
Okay, so the latest is. Oh, I'm still in. Oh, that's why I can see it right here. I figured out why. The blue light's still on. That means this thing is in boot mode. So until I exit boot mode, it's actually not going to be sending. So if I go and reset that now, it should actually go and start communicating as well. So if I do, so Lachlan is on Mac, I'm on Linux. Windows is also possible. So if I do screen dev TTY USB 115200, we should also see similar messages hopefully coming through here.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
You might need to click the reset button on your board again.
Yeah, let's try that again. There we go. So same kind of thing. You see Lachlan's was working. Hopefully mine boots up here in a second. And what you did see before is that we have all of this tagged as well. So the retry device is the name of that device there. And we have all the logs that are happening there. You can also then go and, I believe, query. That's also in the getting started docs, is querying the counter, not only on this. I think there's something on the device as well that you can get.
Yeah, well, so as well as logs, which are kind of our simplest spec, and we also have support for sending data to like databases in the Golioth cloud, also pulling data down, adding data to like streams, all these kind of different things you'd expect from like a cloud, any cloud support. We support it for IoT. And so we have a bunch of other samples. This is just the hello sample, just logs, but we have samples for using LightDB, which is what our cloud database is called, as well as samples for other things. And we recommend taking a look at those after you try the hello sample, and then looking at the source code, seeing how simple it is to use. And yeah, as you can see here, Chris
finally
is
connected.
Chris is working. Yeah.
So it's not super verbose on the connection to the actual towers, and so that's something you might want to do. We'll have other videos about that, but you see this is now sending, and if we switch over to here, I should see the same reset of 1, 2, 3, 4, hopefully. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Yeah. So there's the latest ones as well. So those are the two ways that you can see the data that you're sending, all the logging. You can see how this would be really useful. This is just logging, like Lachlan mentioned. This is just logging. You might have output from a file or from a, as your device is doing something interesting, maybe sending back some simple data. But when you really want to do something interesting, the LightDB samples. So go check that out on the tutorial playlist on YouTube. You'll also be able to check that out. Lachlan, anything else we should mention here before we cut out of here?
I don't think there's anything else to mention about this particular sample or about using the nRF9160, other than the fact that you can also use JLink, as we mentioned before, instead of the new manager.
Great. Well, we'll have more tutorials and more videos here on the Golioth YouTube channel. If you have any questions, you can always ask us, devrel at beta@golioth.io. If you're a member of the beta@golioth.io. And if you want to be a member of the beta, go and sign up over at golioth.io. We are still accepting new members to a private beta, and we will be open later this year for the general public. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.